Brother said there's no place for losers at Christmas. Now he's losing it over what happened next. For years, I believed in family above all else. I thought that no matter what happened, no matter how much we argued, family was something you could always count on. I was wrong, because sometimes, the people you love the most, they see you as nothing more than a resource, useful until you stop giving. And that's when they show you who they really are. It started with Christmas. For as long as I could remember, Christmas at my parents' house was a big deal. Family packed into the living room, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the air, kids running around while my mom tried, and failed, to keep everything under control. This year was supposed to be no different. I had everything planned out, presents for my parents, my brother Ethan, his wife Laura, and their kids. I had even bought extra gifts for unexpected guests. It was going to be a good Christmas, until I showed up at my parents' house and wasn't allowed inside. My mom opened the door, stepping onto the porch before I could even greet her. And the moment I saw her face, my stomach dropped. Something was wrong. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, shifting the bags of presents in my arms. She hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "We don't want you here this year." I froze. "What?" Before she could say another word, Ethan's voice cut through the air from inside the house. "This is no place for losers." I turned, staring at him through the doorway. He was grinning, sprawled out on the couch, his phone in hand like he wasn't just gutting me with his words. I waited for my parents to defend me, to tell him to shut up, to tell me there had been some kind of mistake. But they didn't. My dad just stood behind my mom, looking everywhere except at me. And my mother? She gave me a small, awkward smile. "We just think you've been pulling away from the family lately." I was speechless. Pulling away? I was the one who had always been there. For years, I had gone out of my way to help Ethan. I had paid for his kids' school supplies, covered their summer camp tuition, even helped him pay his mortgage when he was struggling. I had always been the one to step up. And now, suddenly, I wasn't welcome at Christmas because I hadn't done enough. Something inside me snapped. I let out a breath, nodding slowly. "All right, if that's how you feel." I turned around, walked back to my car, and set the bags of presents in the passenger seat. But I didn't leave, because something wasn't right. I sat in the driveway, gripping the wheel, my heart pounding. No place for losers. You've been pulling away. Where was this coming from? I had a feeling I knew the answer, and I wasn't leaving until I heard it from them directly. I got out of the car and walked right back to the front door. When I stepped inside, they all looked shocked, like they hadn't expected me to come back. Ethan was still lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he was above it all. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady. "Why am I not welcome at Christmas?" Ethan smirked. "You really don't get it, do you?" I clenched my jaw. "Get what?" He finally looked up. "You've been slacking. The kids barely got anything from you this year." I stared at him. "What are you talking about? I spent hundreds on gifts. They have more presents in the car than anyone else." He waved a hand dismissively. "Yeah, but last year, you did more. This year, it's like you don't even care. It's embarrassing for us, honestly. Embarrassing. For them. Like I was some charity fund that wasn't delivering enough." I turned to my parents, expecting them to say something, anything, to call him out. But my mom just gave me another awkward smile. "You just bought a new car, though," she said. "So clearly, you had money for that." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so insane I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "The car is on credit," I said, shaking my head. "And even if it wasn't, how does buying a car make me responsible for Ethan's kids?" Ethan leaned back, folding his arms. "You're the one who makes the most money. Families help each other. You've always done that. So that's your reasoning?" I asked, my voice sharper now. "Because I've been generous in the past, I'm obligated to do it forever? And if I don't, I'm a loser?" Ethan shrugged. "If the shoe fits." That was it. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about Christmas. It wasn't about me being family. I wasn't a brother to Ethan. I was a wallet. And now that I wasn't giving enough, I was being discarded. I let out a breath, stepping back. I turned to my parents. "You know what? You're right. I don't belong here." Then I looked Ethan dead in the eye. "Enjoy your Christmas. Because this loser is done financing your life. And this time, I left for real. I gripped the wheel tighter than I needed to as I drove home, my mind racing. For years, I had gone out of my way for them. For years, I had made excuses, telling myself I was just helping out. But the truth? I had let them use me. And now, for the first time, I was finally seeing things clearly. This wasn't about Christmas. This had been building for years. And tonight? Tonight was the moment I decided I was done. The drive home felt surreal. For years, I had been over backward for my family, believing that helping them meant being a good brother, a good son. But tonight, I had been kicked out of my own family's Christmas for not giving enough. And the worst part? No one had defended me. Not my parents. Not even my mom, who I thought would have at least tried to stop Ethan from humiliating me like that. And for what? Because I wasn't paying enough into their lives? Because I wasn't giving them as much as I used to? Something had to change. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what that was. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for a long time, staring at the bags of presents still sitting in the passenger seat. I had spent weeks picking out the perfect gifts, carefully choosing things I knew my parents would love, toys I knew Ethan's kids had been excited about. But for what? To be treated like I was only worth what I could give them? I clenched my jaw and got out of the car. I carried the presents inside, dumped them in the corner, and sat down on the couch, my heart pounding. Because for the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. And more than anything, I was done. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head. No more letting them guilt trip me. No more bending over backward to fix their problems. No more being used. So I did something I had never done before. I blocked Ethan's number. Then I deleted our family group chat. And just like that, I felt lighter. I didn't reach out. And neither did they. No Merry Christmas text. No Happy New Year call. Just silence. And honestly, it felt good. But then, in mid-January, I got an unexpected message. From Laura, Ethan's wife. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I stared at my screen, caught off guard. Laura had always been quiet, the type to avoid confrontation. She never really stood up to Ethan, even when she clearly didn't agree with him. And now, suddenly, she was apologizing. Before I could even respond, she sent another text. I don't agree with what happened. Ethan won't hear it from me, but I thought you should know. I hesitated, because on one hand, it felt good to know someone in that house actually saw what happened for what it was. But on the other hand, her apology felt like too little, too late. She had sat there in silence while Ethan humiliated me in front of our parents. And now that she realized I wasn't coming back, she wanted to make things right. I sighed and typed back. I appreciate it, Laura, but this isn't something I can just move on from. She didn't reply after that. And honestly, I was fine with that, because for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing their approval. I was just done. Then, in early February, something happened I never expected. Ethan showed up at my house. I was in the middle of a work call when I heard loud knocking at my door. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't expecting anyone, and frankly, I didn't care to see anyone. But the knocking continued. Louder, more impatient. I sighed, got up, and opened the door, only to find Ethan standing there, looking more agitated than I had ever seen him. And before I could even say anything, he shoved past me and walked inside. We need to talk. I folded my arms, keeping my voice steady. What's this about? He scoffed. You need to stop acting like this and start helping out again. I stared at him. Then I laughed. Because he couldn't be serious. Helping out? You mean paying for your life? He glared. You're the one with the money. Do you have any idea how hard things have been for us since you decided to be selfish? Selfish. That word burned. Not because it was true, but because of how easily he could twist things to make himself the victim. I shook my head, trying not to lose my temper. Ethan, you're a grown man. You have a wife and kids. If you need more money, go earn it. It's not my job to solve your problems. He scoffed. Oh, so now you're too good for us? You used to help all the time. Yeah, and I see now that it was a mistake. His face darkened. You're a joke. You know that? I took a step forward, lowering my voice. No, Ethan, The joke is that you turned our family against me because I stopped giving you handouts. The joke is that you think I owe you something just because I've helped in the past. But let me be crystal clear. I don't owe you anything." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "We're done here. I'm not giving you another dime. And until you figure out how to act like a real adult, I don't want to hear from you again." He stared at me, his face twisting with rage. For a second, I thought he was going to lash out. But instead, he just turned and stormed out. And when the door slammed behind him, I let out a breath and felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Relief. I figured that was the end of it. That Ethan would grumble to my parents, throw a few tantrums, and then move on. I was wrong, because 2 days later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up, and when I did, a man's voice came through the line. "Is this Daniel?" I hesitated. "Yeah. Who's this?" "My name is Mark Dawson. I'm a lawyer. I represent a client who has recently expressed concerns about certain financial matters involving your family. Do you have a moment to discuss them?" My blood ran cold. A lawyer? Financial matters? Something was seriously wrong, and I had a feeling Ethan was behind it. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to find out. When a lawyer calls you out of nowhere, it's never good news. But when a lawyer calls you about your own family, that's when you know something is seriously wrong. I took a deep breath and tightened my grip on the phone. "What kind of financial matters are we talking about?" I asked. The man, Mark Dawson, paused for a second, then continued in a calm, professional tone. "Your brother, Ethan, has approached us regarding an agreement he claims you had regarding financial support for his family. He believes you committed to assisting him financially long-term, and he is seeking legal action to enforce that." I actually laughed. "Are you serious? Because this couldn't be real." "No way. Mr. Daniels, I assure you, we take every claim seriously," the lawyer said smoothly. "Ethan believes that you made a verbal agreement to provide ongoing financial support, and he is now seeking damages for what he perceives as a breach of that agreement." I couldn't even speak for a second, because this wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was insanity. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Let me get this straight. My brother is trying to sue me for not giving him money?" "That is correct." I let out a sharp exhale, rubbing a hand down my face. "And does he have any actual proof of this so-called agreement?" Mark paused. "At this time, no formal written contract exists. However, he has provided testimony regarding repeated verbal assurances that you would continue to provide financial aid." I almost dropped the phone. Verbal assurances. Verbal. This guy actually thought he could legally force me to keep paying for his life because I had helped him in the past. Unbelievable. I straightened, keeping my tone firm. "Then let me save you some time, Mr. Dawson. There is no contract. There is no agreement. There is no case." There was a pause. Then, "I expected you to say that." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. "Ethan has also expressed concerns about certain funds that were transferred over the years," he continued. "Given the nature of those transactions, there is potential for a claim based on implied contractual obligations." I gritted my teeth. "Let me stop you right there," I snapped. "I gave Ethan money as a gift. GFT. No strings attached. And if he's stupid enough to think that means he can come after me for more, he's about to get a rude awakening." Mark sighed. "I understand your frustration. However, Ethan is serious about pursuing this, and as a precaution, I advise you to retain legal representation in case this moves forward." I clenched my jaw. "Fine. Do whatever you have to do. But if Ethan thinks this is going to work, he's more delusional than I thought." And with that, I hung up. For a second, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hands. Because this wasn't just entitlement anymore. This was full-blown insanity. He was actually trying to take me to court. And for what? Because I stopped giving him free money? I let out a slow breath, my mind racing. I had spent years being his safety net. And now that I was gone, he was desperate. But he was about to learn something real fast. I wasn't going down without a fight. I called Adam immediately. "Dude, you are not going to believe what Ethan is trying to pull now." "What? He's stealing your Netflix account? Selling your stuff on eBay?" I let out a dry laugh. Worse, he's trying to sue me. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. Apparently, in his mind, because I used to help him, that means I owe him financial support forever. Adam let out a low whistle. Wow. So he's officially lost his damn mind. Pretty much. He was quiet for a second. Then, so what's the plan? I smirked. Oh, I'm going to fight this. And when I win, I'm cutting Ethan out of my life for good. Because this was the last straw. I had given him everything. And now, he was trying to take even more. But he was about to learn a very painful lesson. You can't take advantage of someone who's finally done playing your game. Ethan had always been entitled. He thought the world owed him something, that I owed him something, just because I had helped him in the past. But trying to sue me for money I had freely given him, that was a new level of insanity. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. The first thing I did, I got a lawyer of my own. After a quick online search and a few recommendations, I found someone who specialized in civil disputes. Her name was Rebecca Morgan, and from the moment we sat down in her office, I knew I had picked the right person. She flipped through the case notes, let out a sharp laugh, then leaned back in her chair with a smirk. "This is ridiculous," she said, shaking her head. "He has no case." I let out a slow breath. "So you think this will get thrown out?" She shrugged. "I'll file a motion to dismiss, but if he really wants to push it, we might have to go through a few rounds before the court shuts it down. Either way, he's wasting his time." I smirked. Good. Let him waste it. Because if Ethan wanted to play stupid games, he was about to win some very expensive prizes. I didn't hear from him directly for a few weeks, but I knew he was fuming. How? Because our parents started calling. "Sweetheart, why are you doing this to your brother?" my mom asked one afternoon. I let out a bitter laugh. "Doing what? Defending myself?" "He's struggling," she continued, her voice soft. "You know how hard things have been for him." I clenched my jaw. Yeah, and instead of working to fix his problems, he's trying to sue me over money I don't owe him. You think that's normal? She hesitated. Well, maybe he just feels abandoned. Abandoned? I repeated, voice rising. Mom, he kicked me out of Christmas. He called me a loser because I wasn't paying for his life anymore. And now he's trying to legally force me to do it? This isn't about family. This is about control. She sighed. You used to be so close. Yeah, because I was paying for everything. There was a long silence. Then, finally, she said something that made my stomach turn. He's your brother, Daniel. Maybe you should just settle this quietly and give him what he needs. I actually laughed out loud. Because this was peak insanity. Let me get this straight, I said, gripping the phone tighter. Ethan is trying to sue me, and your solution is for me to just give him the money anyway? It would make things easier, she said weakly. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Mom, if Ethan wins this, what do you think happens next? She hesitated. I don't know. He'll never stop, I said firmly. If I give in now, he'll keep coming back every time he wants something. And next time, he won't just sue me. He'll go after you and Dad, too. Silence. Then, finally, in a small voice, she said, I just don't want to see this family fall apart. I exhaled. It already has. And for the first time, I wasn't the one to blame. The next time I heard from Ethan, it wasn't through his lawyer. It was from him directly. He sent me a long, dramatic text, clearly meant to guilt trip me. I don't know how you can live with yourself, Daniel. I'm your brother. I've always had your back, and this is how you treat me. After everything I've done for you, I hope you realize how selfish you're being. You've turned into a completely different person. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I sent one simple reply. Good. That means I finally learned my lesson. And this time, I blocked him for good. The case dragged on for a few more weeks. His lawyer tried to argue implied financial obligation, but Rebecca shut it down with cold, hard facts. There was no contract, no written agreement, no proof that I owed him anything. It was laughable how weak their case was. And in the end, the judge agreed. Case dismissed. Ethan had wasted months of his life, not to mention legal fees, all for nothing. And when it was finally over, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. Not because I won, but because I was finally free of him. I knew Ethan wouldn't take it well. I knew there'd be one last tantrum before he finally gave up. And sure enough, the moment the case was thrown out, he sent a final message. This time, it was a voicemail. I debated deleting it without listening, but curiosity got the best of me, and what I heard made me laugh harder than I had in months. You think you won, Daniel? You think you're better than me now? Fine. If that's how you want it, you're dead to me. I don't have a brother anymore. I actually had to pause the message to wipe a tear from my eye, because the pure irony of it, Ethan had spent months trying to force me back into his life, and now that he lost, he was acting like he was the one cutting me off. I finished the message, let out one last laugh, then deleted it forever. Because Ethan? He was right about one thing. I didn't have a brother anymore, and I had never been happier. Ethan was gone. For years, he had treated me like a walking ATM, demanding money and guilt-tripping me when I didn't give enough. But now, he had officially cut me off. And the funniest part? He thought it was a punishment, like I was going to miss him, like I was going to come crawling back, begging to be in his life again. But the truth? I had never felt lighter. After the lawsuit was thrown out, things went quiet for a while. Ethan stopped trying to contact me. My parents, though, they still weren't letting it go. One afternoon, my dad called me. At first, I ignored it, but after the third missed call, I sighed and picked up. What? He let out a deep breath. Son, we need to talk. I closed my eyes. If this is about Ethan, it's about you, he interrupted. About what you're doing to this family. I actually had to take a second to process that. What I'm doing to the family. I let out a dry laugh. Wow, you're seriously blaming me for this? You're the one who's turning your back on us, he snapped. Your own brother needed you, and instead of helping, you let things get to this point. My jaw clenched. No, Dad. Ethan let things get to this point. He sued me. He kicked me out of Christmas. And now that I'm finally done letting him use me, suddenly I'm the problem? Silence. Then, family is supposed to take care of each other. And that's when I snapped. Family is supposed to respect each other, too. But you and Mom sat there and let Ethan treat me like garbage because it was easier for you. You didn't stop him from humiliating me. You didn't stop him from dragging me to court. And now that he's finally out of my life, you expect me to just forgive and forget? I exhaled, shaking my head. I'm done being the only one who tries in this family. If you want to keep enabling Ethan, go ahead. But I'm out. You don't mean that. I laughed. Yeah, Dad, I do. Then I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I wish I could say that was the last of it, that my parents came to their senses. But people like them, they don't change. And a week later, they made their final move. I was at work when I got an email from my mom. The subject line? We need to talk about the family estate. I frowned, my stomach twisting as I opened it. And the moment I read the first few lines, I felt pure rage. Because my parents, they had decided to rewrite their will. And they wanted me to know that since I was choosing to separate myself from the family, Ethan would now be getting everything. The house, the assets, every single thing they owned. They had literally disinherited me for not letting Ethan take advantage of me anymore. I stared at the screen, completely stunned. Not because I cared about the inheritance, but because they actually thought this would hurt me. That I'd care. That I'd crawl back to them just so I wouldn't be left out. They had never understood me. Not once. I didn't even respond. I just closed my laptop and sat there, letting it sink in. This was final. My family had chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. But instead of feeling sad, I felt free, because for years, I had been carrying them, supporting them, chasing their approval. And now, I didn't have to try anymore. I was done. For real this time. That night, Adam came over with a six-pack. He sat on my couch, cracking open a beer. So, how's the Daniels family circus going? I let out a dry laugh, holding up my phone. They officially disinherited me. Adam almost choked on his drink. No freaking way. I slid my laptop toward him so he could see the email. He read it, shook his head, then let out a sharp laugh. Dude, they actually think you care. I smirked. Yeah, joke's on them. Because Ethan? He could have it all. The house, the money, the parents who spent years enabling him. Because I had finally realized something. I had spent my whole life believing that family was everything. But the truth? Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away. And that's exactly what I did. I should have been angry. Most people would be if their own family disowned them, just because they refused to be used. But when I woke up the next morning, after everything had finally sunk in, I didn't feel angry at all. I felt free, because now there was no more pressure, no more feeling obligated to help, no more guilt when I didn't give enough. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about Ethan, my parents, or their constant expectations. They had made their choice. And now, I was making mine. A few days later, I got a text from Laura, Ethan's wife. I had honestly forgotten she even had my number. "Hey, can we talk?" I debated ignoring it. But against my better judgment, I responded. "About what?" She took a few minutes to reply. Then, I want to explain some things. Can we meet? Part of me didn't care what she had to say, but another part of me was just curious enough to say yes. We met at a small cafe near my office. She looked nervous as she sat across from me, stirring her coffee even though she hadn't taken a sip. Finally, she sighed. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "For what, exactly?" She swallowed hard. "For everything. For not speaking up when Ethan was treating you like garbage. For letting him drag you to court. For all of it." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked genuinely regretful. But was it because she actually felt bad? Or because she realized I wasn't coming back? "You didn't stop him," I said simply. "Even when you knew he was wrong." She flinched. "I know. I didn't know how to." "You didn't even try." She looked down. "You're right." Silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "Ethan's falling apart." I snorted. "Not my problem." She shook her head. "No. I mean really falling apart. The lawsuit drained our savings. Your parents are giving him everything in their will, but that doesn't help him now. He's been taking out loans, spending money we don't have. And he's different." I frowned. "Different how?" She hesitated. Then, in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "He's angry all the time. At me. At the kids. At himself. I think he blames me for losing you." I stared at her, caught off guard. I had spent so long thinking Ethan only cared about what I could do for him. But now, it sounded like, in some twisted way, he actually needed me. Not as a wallet, but as the one person who had always been there. And now that I was gone, he didn't know how to handle it. Laura let out a shaky breath. "I don't expect you to forgive him, and I'm not asking you to fix anything. I thought you should know." I nodded slowly. "Thanks for telling me." She gave me a sad smile. "Take care of yourself, Daniel." "You too, Laura." And just like that, she left. And for the first time, I felt something close to pity for Ethan, but not enough to go back. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights, thinking, for years, I had given everything to my family, and when I finally stopped, they threw me away. But now, I had nothing to give them anymore. And for the first time in my life, I finally felt like my own person. Ethan would never change. My parents would never change. But me? I was finally moving on. For good. It had been months since I last spoke to Ethan. Months since my parents disowned me. Months since I stopped feeling like I owed them anything. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. At first, I thought I would miss them, that there would be some part of me that would ache to go back. But the truth? I didn't miss them at all. Because the more time passed, the more I realized just how much I had sacrificed for people who never actually saw me as family. And the further I got from them, the happier I became. Ethan, on the other hand, he was falling apart. I didn't hear it from him directly, of course, but mutual friends, distant relatives, they all had stories about how he had burned through what little money he had left, how he was blaming everyone but himself. He tried to get another loan but got rejected. And the most pathetic part? He was still waiting for me to come back. He truly believed that, at some point, I'd forgive him, that I'd come back and fix his life for him. But I never did, and I never would. My parents tried to reach out, too, Not directly, of course, but through relatives, through mutual friends. It was always the same story. They miss you. They don't want things to end like this. They're willing to talk if you'll just apologize. Apologize? I almost laughed every time I heard that, because they still didn't get it. They still thought I was the one who needed to make things right. But I had already made things right, for myself, and I wasn't about to undo that. The final nail in the coffin came when I got a letter from my parents' lawyer. Apparently, they had a change of heart about their will. They were still leaving everything to Ethan, but they had added a clause. If Ethan mismanaged the inheritance, the estate would be donated to charity instead. I laughed so hard I almost cried, because that told me everything I needed to know. They knew. They finally knew. They knew Ethan was a failure. They knew he couldn't handle money. And they knew that, eventually, he would ruin himself completely. So instead of letting him take everything, they put in a safety net. But me? I wasn't in the will at all. Not even as a last resort. And that was perfectly fine by me. Because, in the end, I didn't lose a family. I just stopped pretending I ever had one. And the best part? I never looked back.